Right. So, hello, Chris.
Hello.
So, what frustrates you most about the graphic design industry / practice?
I think probably at the moment the thing that frustrates me most is the way in which people outside the industry talk about it. So there's a lot of a perception, I think, that graphic design is always wasteful.
Yeah.
So whenever there's a discussion about a new brand that's been launched, it inevitably focuses on the logo, and it inevitably focuses on it being a waste of money. And, you know, we speak about that from experience of when 2012 stuff was launched. The very first thing the very next day was all about, oh, what a tremendous waste of money. And I think it undervalues not only the effort that goes in naturally to all of the people involved, because it's never just one designer, it's always a team.
Yeah.
It undervalues actually the impact that design can have. And I think really good design is positive and can be commercially positive.
Yeah.
And actually the role of design is to add benefit. And graphic design should add value. Now that might be aesthetic value, it might be kind of informational value as to how to make things clearer for people.
Right.
It might be a case of actually even a commercial value of just straightening things up so that you're not wasting money on reinventing the wheel every time.
Yeah.
But it always adds some kind of value if it's good. If it's bad, it can be a waste of money, but you try to make it as good as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good answer. So, in a presentation at a Web Summit, you've said that brands have to be brave, but shouldn't we designers be brave as well? So why don't graphic designers voice their opinions about the industry and the world around them more? And the second part is, what are graphic designers' responsibilities to the world, perhaps socially, politically, and environmentally?
Good question. There's a couple of questions about it. I think it is important that designers are brave. I think it's important that as a designer you get people to ask questions as much as solve questions.
Yeah.
So there's a launch of a new Slack work today or yesterday, a new redesign. It's quite good. It's very kind of practical, and it does many of the jobs I'm sure that were asked in the brief. I think some of the response, and there's some negative response online, and I'm kind of always a little bit reluctant to be negative about other people's work, because I don't think that's necessarily helpful. But I think it's interesting, a lot of the challenges that have been raised are about actually whether it is differentiating or whether it is kind of something that feels special or different.
Yeah.
And I think probably there's a value in looking into that. I think there is a real role for designers to invent stuff that people haven't seen before. And I think it's a challenge, particularly when you've got technology companies whose whole behaviour is about making things as frictionless and as simple as possible. And that includes the design and the user experience. The danger is you create something that becomes a little bit soulless and very much like everything else. And I think one of the things we've always focused on here, and me personally have always focused on here, is creating things that are like no other.
Yeah.
And are deliberately different and purposefully different, even if that pisses people off, even if that makes people go, that is a waste of money, or I don't get it.
Yeah.
At least it challenges people to think. And I think the reason why you do that is to get them to think about things that they haven't considered before. And that's where the other side comes in, about having a kind of social conscience.
Yeah.
Because the other side of Thinkable Followings, and again, I've been here 15 years, the reason why I stay is because we care about the stuff we put in the world, because we care about the world. And I think it's important you have a point of view on why you're making something, and also how, whether the product that it's representing, or whether it's a company that it stands in front of, how that company or that product is adding value as well. I'm not saying you should always just work for charities, but there should always be a positive reason why you're working with an organisation, and the job of design can be to amplify that good.
Yeah. But why don't designers voice that more openly, or criticize some things that they stand for? Because I've spoken to a few now, and a lot of them say, like, yeah, well, of course these things are important, but I don't ever see it.
Yeah. I think because people are scared. I think because often that might mean you have to turn down a job. I think we're in a lucky position whereby I think our reputation means that we're able sometimes to walk away from clients. If you run an independent and you rely on monthly revenue, it's very hard to turn down a client. So I think part of the reason why people don't voice it is that they're scared of losing work, and that's a shame, because more people should, because then we would change things. That's easy for me to say because I've got, sat on the 9th floor of a building that Omnicom owns. I'm playing with their money, so it's easy from our perspective to be like that. And I appreciate it's different if you run a smaller independent. You have to kind of take your opportunities when you can.
Your studio's report, Radical Everything, claim that businesses should be vehicles of social change. Other studios might not agree so much. Kermayev and Kesmar, who designed the Chase Manhattan co-brand, National Geographic, NBC, PBS, I'm sure you're familiar, declared that it is none of their business to evaluate the ethics of their clients' practice. They said, and I quote, "We do not feel responsible for the character of those we work for." Do you agree?
No, I don't agree. I think by proxy of being involved in representing their external characteristics, you are responsible for their character to a degree. If you are involved in putting their voice out in the world and amplifying their voice, you cannot not have some involvement in what they're saying. And I don't, because I can understand where they're coming from, but it's not the same point as we will only work with companies that are good for the world. We'll only work with the Patagonias. We'll only work with the Reds. Yeah. It's not the same. I think it's about making sure that wherever you try to add value, you are that critical voice in the room. I stand in a lot of meeting rooms that are boardrooms with CEOs, and we are able to be that critical voice. Now, whether that critical voice is heard or not, that's a different question, but we are able to have that voice, and I think it's important that people do that, because that's how change is made, by kind of chipping things away a little bit and actually going, you know what, guys, you can't say that because people won't believe you and because it's not true. And there are always going to be organisations that we would never work with, so we wouldn't work with the arms industry necessarily, or we wouldn't work with kind of like cigarettes or things like that. KKK. Exactly, it's very rare that they're going to be knocking on the door. But I think there's always going to be a challenge with any organisation that you work with. If you work for a big FMCG brand or a supermarket, you're dealing with the obesity crisis, or you're...
What's an FMCG?
So like fast-moving consumer goods.
Okay.
So like products like crisps or chocolate. Okay, there's a way of looking at it of like, you're responsible for the obesity crisis. Well, you're kind of responsible to a degree, but you can do what you can to add some positive value there. But that might just be a case of helping people to understand, to consider it as part of a responsible diet. But I don't think you can completely remove yourself from responsibility. I think that's a bit of a cop-out.
So I think it from what I'm gauging, it seems like there's a line you have to tread in some ways. There's like an add-on to this. I just want to hear your reaction on it. So some would say that Wolf Olin's working with Uber sort of turned a blind eye to Uber's infamous scandals and their, let's say, inconsiderate moral and ethical standards.
One of the reasons why I think we've worked with them and enjoyed working with them is that they are in a moment of change, and I think we always work with organisations that are in a moment of change. We've worked with big banks, we've worked with supermarkets, people who have had, I worked with Tesco for a number of years, and they had a lot of negative stories when we first started working with them. But they wanted to change, and I think that's true of all our clients, and that's why we take on certain jobs, because we can help them do that. Now, are we responsible for how that always plays out from there onwards? Not necessarily, but I think the reason why we get involved with big complex organisations, and any big complex organisation will have stories that are difficult and need working on, and challenges around various areas.
Ubers were a bit more
some parts that are still some parts that are still significant. But we've worked with huge organisations that have had troubles. I worked with Barclays for years, and they had all manner of kind of issues and involvement in responsibility for the banking crisis, for example. But there were people within there who wanted to change, and the briefs that we got were about accelerating that change or magnifying that change. And I think as long as we're working on that, that makes sense to me.
And this is also kind of on this area again. The topic is, can branding ever be authentic? So, I mean, Iceland, the supermarket, not the country, now supports the rainforest, and Cosmopolitan now supports plus-size models. But it also seems like a layered, convenient attempt to improve their reputation and their sales as cultural attitudes shift. So how do you sort of know when brands are authentic, and what do you do to make sure that they're authentic before you sort of take them on, if you do?
That's a really good question, and I think the key to that is often when you look at an initial brief or you do your early research into an organisation, you can see whether something is genuinely part of the fabric of a business, or because it will be involved normally in the commercial side of the business. So it won't be a CSR project. It won't be run by a small team that's distributed, that's away from the boardroom.
Yeah.
It will have the backing normally of the CEO. It'll be vocalised by the board, and it'll have the involvement of the board. I don't know the Iceland example, but I can imagine that's probably been driven by the marketing department, or has been driven by even the PR department, or even by kind of the social responsibility department. It could be 2 or 3 people.
I don't know if it was driven by it. Just we got this presented to us. I think my mother came, and sometimes you just think to yourself, "Man, it just seems very convenient now that you do this." And for years you weren't.
Yeah, I think there's another thing of because it's a really good question. How do you know? I think sometimes it's gut instinct. I mean, a lot of what we do in this building is gut instinct, and we try to dress it up with models and structures and approaches and kind of all this documentation around but a lot of it's when you see eyeball someone in the room, are they bullshitting you or not? And I think that I've done this for a long time, and I still rely on that when I walk in, and sometimes we do walk away from a pitch. We won't take it on just because of the money, because often doing a job is 2 years of your life. I'm not giving 2 years of my life to someone who I think is bullshitting me. But I do appreciate that we're in a slightly lucky position of being able to do that. And it's not something I take lightly. It's one of the reasons why I stay. It's one of the reasons why I keep getting inspired by the place, is because we attract people who feel like that. But it's not easy.
We're shifting now a bit.
Yeah.
What concerns you most about technology right now as an individual?
Just been writing something about a brief that's just come in about an organisation that's very sort of technologically focused and does a lot of work in the area of AI. And I think one of the biggest worries we've got is that we are so worried about it that we're not really getting engaged with it. It's I read newspaper reports about what are we going to do when AI finally strikes. It's already here. It's already happening.
Yeah.
The involvement of technology in our daily lives is inseparable from our daily life. My daughter wakes up, and the first thing she does is ask for the iPad so she can watch Minions. And that's she's integrated into that technology from being 2 years old. She can operate an iPad with the same dexterity of her grandma. And
question probably better.
Yeah, and we worry that this is ruining us or rotting our brains. I really don't think so. I think we just got to look at it as what a fantastic time to live in, where we can still direct it, where we can still kind of use it to our advantage and power humanity via this technology. And we're not enslaved to it. We're not kind of trapped by it. We're just not utilising it as well as we can do.
Yeah.
So I think that's the biggest worry I have about it. Do I think that technology will replace me in my job? No. because of those things we talked about earlier, because of things like gut instinct and the ability to walk into a room and sense another human being's feelings, because of the ability to pull an idea out of nowhere. Do I think technology will replace a lot of people who are really shit at this job? Yes. I think a massive amount of people will lose their jobs in the design industry, but they'll be the ones that are doing the type of work that can be done by robots. Repetitive, non-thinking, unconnected to the real world type of work, just trying stuff out for the sake of it. And if anything, it's a good thing. So because the work will then become more imaginative, it will empower people to think in bigger and brighter ways. It will encourage people to do weirder stuff. You know, one of the downsides of the technological kind of advancement over the last few years is that blandness that everything's become the same.
Yeah, you said that before.
It drives me nuts because it should be the opposite.
Brands are boring, kind of thing.
They are boring. A quarter. I said a couple of things. I said like a quarter of brands could disappear overnight and no one would give a shit.
Is that also what concerns you about technology as a designer, that things are going to get boring and stale?
Yeah, and I genuinely believe it should be the opposite. It's like we've got more tools, yet we're using them to do fewer things in ways that we've done them before. That seems a bit odd.
It's formulaic.
Because we rely on the tool to do some of the work whereby that freedom would have normally come in. So the unexpected accident, the ability to go off at a tangent, like an algorithm will not take you to a place you haven't already been. An algorithm will always take you to a place where you expect it to go. And you know, if I had one kind of thing that we're trying to push in this building, even this year, is to do deliberately weirder stuff. To do stuff that looks like nothing else, to do stuff that breaks a boundary, whether it's in terms of a technological boundary, whether it's in terms of like a visual one, whether it's in terms of like how a brand integrates with other brands. The opportunity is huge, yet everybody's kind of funneling down to a singular point. So I'm massively excited by technology, but I'm excited by how we can exploit it as opposed to what it's doing to us.
I think you answered all the last questions. We say, maybe you can just clarify, what do you see the biggest challenge of your profession being to itself and the outside world in relation to technology and the other aspects?
I think one of the biggest challenges is maintaining integrity. And by integrity, I sort of mean a combination of individuality and belief. Like, there's something about trying to get an idea from the center of your head to the middle of the world that is the reason I get up in the morning, and it's the reason why I get excited about a job I've been doing for 20 odd years, is because it's an amazing thing. And the idea that can somehow be done in a formula or somehow can be done in a way that is replicable over and over again just makes me sad, because I think I feel incredibly privileged to do the job that I do. I mean, there's a lot of people who have much harder lives on a daily basis in this country and outside of this country. All designers are really privileged because they get to do something that is essentially play, and it is essentially the same joy that you had with my daughter sat down with a pack of crayons. I look at her and she's doing the same thing that Dad does every day, and that's an amazing thing, and we should all be kind of proud to have that role. And in order for it to continue, we've got to continue doing the thing that makes that special, which is inventing and dreaming things and coming up with stuff that hasn't been done before, and being passionate and vocal about it, and getting in people's faces and saying this is a different way to do things, and not following a crowd, and trying every single day to do something that is not the same as what happened yesterday. There we go. That's kind of what is this helpful?
Yeah, it is. It's 3 now. I had one more question.
Yeah, go on.
What we talked about. So I spoke to a lot of things that I've been looking at a lot are how there's no criticism in design.
Yeah.
And I don't need to mention the blogs because it's all of them, maybe apart from AIG or Iron Design and Design Observer, who sort of critique and talk about sort of constructively about the implications of design and stuff. And I spoke to some of my tutors, and I did this whole project on sort of what aspects of what is the role of a designer is, and very little of it seems to be about criticism and taking the industry as responsible for something that's happening. So what would it require for designers to, in prominent positions, to go out and be more sort of like vocal about it? Because you say you can lose a client, but that just may be a thing to how do we get around that then when we can go out and say those things?
I think the thing is to almost remember what we learned at college. So the thing that sticks in my mind at college is every few days you would have a crit, and the crit being the short form of critique, and critique is about being really additive with what your viewpoint is. Now you can make a negative point, but you do it in an additive way. But I think it makes sense. And I think what's annoying at the moment is you look at all the blogs and below the line, particularly on the blogs, and it's all, this reminds me of this. It's all shortcuts to kind of critique. It's not real critique. There's nothing additive there. And I think what it will take is maybe a few people to get together. Maybe there needs a new type of forum. Maybe there needs something away from the current platforms. I look at kind of D&AD as D&AD potentially is a great opportunity to spark that debate, but I don't see it happening there. And it feels almost like it's too much of a... and I love it. We go every year, and it's still one of those places where it attracts people of interest. But is it sparking the type of debate that you want to have? I think there needs to be new platforms. I think there needs to be new spaces for people to feel confident that they're not going to get shot down as soon as they say something. Because the downside of being vocal about something is you just get them, bombarded on Twitter with like people just saying that you're an idiot. And if you call, I don't give a toss about that. That's fine. But I think it makes it difficult then to just keep doing it over and over again. But all it'll take is a couple of people to do that. I often wonder, I once had a conversation with one of the guys from Design Studio, and maybe there's something about perceived, competitors working together. I think it's all such a kind of fake competitive thing. We pitch together, but it's almost like doing football teams. You play against each other, but you're all playing football, right? You're all still standing up for what football is. And it kind of feels like maybe it's just a Brexit thing inspiring. Maybe there should be kind of cross-party alliances or whatever, but maybe that would help. Maybe if there's a voice that's made up of significant senior people from some of the most recognisable agencies coming out and having a voice, because we haven't touched on it, but I think one of the things that drives me nuts is the amount of money that design contributes to the country, in terms of hard, cold revenue, right? Yet the government has a Minister for Culture, Media and Sport. Bullshit. That's it's just ridiculous. Culture, media, how many billions of pounds worth of kind of it's insane. There should be a minister for design. There should be a minister for exactly. And I think that level of platform would be interesting. Maybe it's about getting out of the kind of inner circle and getting out into be a vocal platform, a platform that is in the world on a world stage, talking about the influence of design on a fundamental level. Is what needs to be done, and maybe it does require people who are currently competitors to work together in order to do that. Because only then we'll start to have the proper discussions away from that Kernan's rubbish or that logo looks like this.
But so I have a question. It's a quite quick one. So on It's Nice, for example, which has 1.5 million readers, right? It's prominent blogs now. They built an empire. When they feature your work, do they ask you for permission to feature it? And then the other question is, would you be okay with them saying, well, Wolf Oldham did this thing for Uber, what are the ethical impacts of this, that we should consider those things. Would that be an appropriate way of doing it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we know Alex because Alex Beck spent time with us here as a visiting creative director, and I think one of the benefits of It's Nice as a platform is that it genuinely feels very honest and open, and I they're good at critiquing because they add colour to a project, or they put a rounded view on it. We've never got a problem with that. Yeah. I mean, the other thing about press as well, when it gets out there, is you can't control it. Yeah. Like, people will have a point of view. So, yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, you have to, if you're putting stuff out in the world, you can't complain if people have got a point of view.
I just wondering if it's nice I could have more of a opinionated approach to things.
I think so, maybe, but I think you're right to kind of point out, if it is an opinionated approach, it shouldn't just be one person's kind of review of a piece of work. It should be a kind of rounded understanding of, like, a group of people's review, or a much more balanced take on it.
It just seems like we can do it with art and media and music and stuff. Design a lot.
We've been working with Will Gompertz, who's the arts correspondent at the BBC. Really interesting bloke, but he's got a very good perspective on this stuff. He does very, very considered reviews that are often quite, pointed. But he's very interesting. I can introduce you maybe to.
What's his name?
Will Gompertz.
Will Gompertz.
Yeah, Gompertz. I think.
Sure. Cool.
Yeah, but he's an interesting chap. He's got a good perspective on stuff. He's very good. What he does, I think, and this is important with design as well, is he mashes up the high and the low. So one day he'll be off speaking with the dude who directed Black Panther, and then the next day he'll be off to speak to somebody from a high arts thing, and then the next day he'll be speaking to Steve Coogan about the film that he was just in. And he's got a very kind of broad understanding. I think that's what's missing from design. Design can get almost a bit too tribal, and we should be much more kind of focused on considering ourselves as a group in the world.